was just overthinking with Z, a weekly podcast where Z overthinks out loud about health, lifestyle, career, friendships, people, and everything in between. How is it that I was in London and 5-6 hours later I am in this completely different place with people who have completely different principles, morality, completely different culture, they speak a different language, they eat different things, and they care about different things? Today's episode is very special. Big shout out to Roxana who suggested this topic. Home away from home. I'm very excited to bring you this episode because it's something that I have a lot of experience in. Obviously, if you have been listening to I Was Just Overthinking with Z from the start, you know that I moved from Azerbaijan to UK when I was 17 years old to pursue my bachelor's degree. There is so much I've learned. There's so much I'm going to mention here. Please let me know if any of you can relate to this because I always find it really fun when people can relate to things that you've gone through. If any of you out there have gone through a similar experience or if you can relate to the points I'll be mentioning in this episode, let me know. You know my Instagram. Go ahead, give me a follow at zpod.cast. And without any further ado, let's jump into Home Away from Home. Episode 9. The first thing I wanted to mention is hyper-independence. When you're 17 years old, you basically don't really know how to do a lot of things. Even though I grew up helping out in the house, observe people around me, what they do, and that's why sometimes when I do attempt something that is super new to me, something I've never done before, I usually catch on pretty quickly. I can give you an example of cooking. Why I wasn't struggling too much with cooking, because I observed my mom, my nana, and anyone in my family who really cooked. And I've always observed them as a child, as a teenager. So when I had to do it myself, it wasn't a big deal. It was very actually easy for me to pick it up. I already knew like basics of it, obviously, because I realized that a lot of kids grow up without doing any chores or without doing anything that lets them learn independence. So I am very happy that I was in a position that I did know how to do a lot of things. But unfortunately, it's very different. It's different when you have to go through it. Like when you have to do it, you don't really have a choice. You're thrown into this new environment. You have to get on with it and you have to do it well because it's already difficult enough to move to a different country. You have to sustain yourself properly and be basically hyper independent. And that was like the biggest thing for me. I don't want to say it was a struggle, but I think it was something that I had to learn to do very quickly. Again, like I knew basics of things, I knew basics of cooking, cleaning, but when you have to do it all by yourself and it's just literally you in your room, have to take care of it, it's completely a different story. Another part of hyper independence was paying for everything. So paying for everything that you have to do, sustaining yourself financially. I think that's a really big part of hyper independence that comes with when you move to a different country at a younger age. Because in my family, like all the money matters were all looked after by my dad. My dad took care of bills, he took care of, and he still does in the house. He takes care of things like paying for things, all the bills, all the household maintenance type of things. So to me, it was very strange. One of the things I actually had no idea about was how to pay a bill. And I actually didn't really know what type of bills I would need to pay. But luckily, because of my personality, I used to observe my dad, or like I would always listen to what my dad would speak about when it came to bills and stuff. So I had pretty good understanding of it. But again, it's such a different story when you are doing it by yourself, especially when it's in a different country. To me, it's like, oh, apparently we're supposed to pay for internet, we're supposed to pay for electricity, for water, for council tax, you know what I mean? It's just so many things that you have no idea about. It just kind of happens behind the closed doors, if you like your dad or your mom takes care of it. The adult in the house just takes care of it. As a child, as a teenager, you never really think about it twice. To you, it's like, it's a given. Like they just do it, they never talk about it, just don't think about it twice. So for me, I was like, okay, even though in my first year in uni I was staying in a student accommodation, after that I had to find a house to rent and everything. That was a whole another story. It's like when you're renting a house, there's so many things to it. For the first time in my life, I entered a contract. When you're 17 years old, when you're 18 years old, and you've never kind of lived outside of your family house, it's just such a odd thing to go through. It's like you're supposed to be signing things on your own behalf. You're doing all of these things just for yourself, and it just feels weird. Of course, I got used to it. Obviously, I did, but yeah, like hyper independence in terms of household things, it was just a completely different thing. I feel like one thing I genuinely struggled with, and I think I never really spoke about this to many people in my life, one of the biggest things I struggled when I moved away from home was food. And again, it might sound like ridiculous to some people, to some of my listeners. They're like, what do you mean? Like, why did food play a role in this? I'm not going to mention the obvious bits, that obviously food tastes different in UK, and I think it would taste different to anyone who's from any other country. It doesn't have to be Azerbaijan, UK. You could be from Poland and you travel to Australia and the food in Australia tastes different. And of course it is, because there's so many reasons and factors why the food tastes different. It's the soil, it's the climate, it's the agricultural practices, farming practices, you know, the accessibility of like good food, etc. There's so many factors to it, right? But to me, it was just a really, really big struggle. For the first year I was staying in my uni accommodation, I have like OCD tendencies. So for me, sticking to something that I like is very important. So if you know me to a degree, you know that I have the same breakfast every day. And if I steer off of that, it just gives me like major OCD. So imagine when I was 17 years old, I'm obviously at that point experimenting with cooking, with all of that stuff, and I'm trying to make things that I've known from my family, and it's so different to do that when you're in a different country, because first of all, you don't really know where to go. Like, you don't know where to go to buy things. I had a stupid cost cutter that was not cutting any costs. That was such an expensive little shop, but it was so accessible. It was in one of the student accommodation bits, so we had like a couple of them, and in one of them on the reception floor there was a cost cutter, and I would just go there, do my entire week's shopping, my groceries and everything, and it was so extremely expensive, but my stupid 17-year-old mind was like, yep, this is familiar. I'm scared to go to the town because it's scary there. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. So I would just kind of stick to what I saw, stick to things that were so convenient and kind of there. I was so scared of like getting out of that comfort zone, because at that age, when, you know what I mean, it's like when you've moved away, there's too many changes. You're just going to stick to things that are very sort of, that require minimal anxiety, if you like. Like, you don't want to do things that will invoke some sort of anxiety in you, because you're already kind of on edge a little bit about things, because you don't know anything around you. People are different, they all look different, they speak different language, you know what I mean? It's just such an alien experience. So for me, with all my groceries, I used to be so bad. Like, it was the worst thing. The stupid cost cutter, I hate it till this day. I can't believe, now that I'm looking back at it, it's like I hate the fact that I would spend that much money just because I was scared. But you know what? I'm not going to be so harsh on myself, because it's completely normal and I did what I had to and I survived. I feel like I went through it, and that I was supposed to kind of go through it, and that is completely fine. My struggle with food was that I basically didn't like anything. I would make something and I would just kind of throw it away. It was like extremely wasteful, and I hate wasting things, so it was playing up on my mind a lot. But I would make something, I would cook something, and I would completely hate what I made. I would think, this is so disgusting, this is not tasty, I don't like anything I'm eating, I'm not finding things here that I used to love to eat. So I would say a considerable amount of my time during my bachelor's degree, I was struggling with food a lot. And I want to say it took me like 3 to 4 years to kind of get adjusted to the food and like get used to what I actually like to make and what I'm good at, etc. And now I am a really good cook, but at the time I was obviously learning how to cook properly, and I was also trying to learn what I genuinely like to eat. I mean, this is gonna be probably a completely separate episode in the future. I'm thinking it's gonna be season 2 actually, probably not in season 1 yet. But my entire relationship with food since I was a kid was really difficult. I always struggled with liking food in general. Like I always struggled with the idea that, why am I being so ungrateful? There is food on my plate, but I would struggle a lot because I used to just, even when I was back home, I used to not like certain things that I was eating. And imagine when I moved away, I realized that, okay, maybe some of it wasn't that bad, but I still hate it. Like, I still don't like it and I don't like what I'm making. So for me, the relationship with food was even worse when I moved. And maybe that's something that just had to be something super personal to me. I don't know if people can relate to that, but let me know if you can. But food was a really, really big issue for me, especially at the start. I feel like the other thing I took some time getting adapted to, but I feel like that didn't really take me too long to get used to because it was a very positive thing. I wasn't used to how people interacted with each other, like how the normal etiquette of people is in this country in UK. I wasn't really used to it because the people are very, very nice, at least in a sense that they're very good with these niceties like pleases and thank yous and you're welcomes. Like it's almost to a faulty degree. It's like people are extremely nice in that sense. They will say sorry, they will say thank you, they'll say please. Back home, there isn't such a culture. We don't have that type of a understanding of things. We don't have that type of mannerisms. We don't really speak to people like that. We of course will say thank you. We will say these things, but we will never really do that to strangers. It would be kind of very, just a lot of the time they're just silent. They don't say a lot. Of course, when you're in the house and like when you're in your family, like of course, people would encourage you to say those things. They would encourage you to be nice and polite within your family. So, like, to the elder people, to people that you respect, or, to your family members, to your parents, etc. But it was never really a big part of Azerbaijani culture. I still think it's not really a big part of our culture back home, but it is a really big deal in UK. And it's genuinely to a point where I became a person who always does the same thing. I kind of adapted to that very quickly, because I ultimately don't really think it's a bad thing necessarily. I think it's a good thing to be nice. And whenever I go back home, I feel like people actually react to me so much more positively because of how polite I come across, even though it's something that I kind of had to learn to survive in a way, like to get used to the culture in UK, but then it has really great positives about it. I guess the flip side of the coin with how people interact in UK with each other, people are not really direct in a sense that they don't really like being honest with each other. Like, especially I noticed it when I was talking to some of my uni friends. I want to say like in second year or something. And someone asked me a question. They said, oh, like, how do I look? Or something like that. I'm like, oh, you gained a bit of weight. And to me, that was such an Azerbaijani thing to say because back home, we're very direct. Like, if someone asks us a question, like back home, we just are very honest with each other. We will say, yeah, you have gained weight. Or like, oh, this doesn't really look good. Or this does look good, Like, back home, we don't really care that much about stuff like this. And when I came to UK, I was like, oh, wow, I felt like I offended a lot of people as I went through. Like, I was extremely direct. I feel like this sort of move and this realization had a huge impact on me because I was like, okay, I really need to filter myself because back home it was normal for me to be a certain way. And like when I moved here, it's like, oh, okay, you cannot be that direct with people. Like you need to be a little bit more filtered out when you talk to people. If they ask you a question, you need to be extremely nice about it and you need to kind of sugarcoat it slightly. Even though sometimes I feel like I do struggle with it, but I definitely think that I have changed that in that sense a lot. I've become, on the outside, I'm much, much nicer to people. It's just that I've learned the technique to speaking to people in a nicer way and in a way that wouldn't really offend them, depending on, I guess, where they're from. But I feel like that's something that I had to learn. I'm gonna go into something a little bit deeper, but this is the feeling that I've been getting a lot in the past couple of years. Whenever I get a chance to fly back home, etc., I get this interesting feeling that I'm kind of slightly out of this world. So whenever I would travel, there would be this weird feeling in my head. I wouldn't really understand what it was about, but basically, I can give you an example. So I got on a plane and, I was in London, and then 5 to 6 hours later, I get out of the plane, I'm looking around, and I'm like, oh my god, this is the place I've known my entire life. Nothing has changed here. Everything is the same. Like, people are the same. You see some improvements, etc. Like, it's so nice to see places or things get developed or constructed or stuff like that. It's so lovely to see when you get back home. But to me, it was like such a weird feeling. How is it that I was in London and 5 6 hours later I am in this completely different place with people who have completely different principles, morality, completely different culture, they speak a different language, they eat different things, and they care about different things? The biggest feeling of like being just out of this world to me was like, okay, this is a piece of land that I just got on this plane, I flew here, now I'm here. It's some sort of land where people have been living for centuries, and it's just so different from UK and vice versa. I don't know if that's something is even relatable to people, but to me it's just something probably so obvious, but I am so aware of that feeling every time I travel. To me it just feels so surreal. To me it feels like out of this world. I kind of lost my sense of almost belonging in a place because I'm like, okay, it's just 6 hours later and I'm a completely different person here. Is that what happens? It's just very strange feeling, and I don't even know how to describe it properly, but hopefully you got the gist of it. I wanted to focus on like one of the positives, one of the greatest positives of moving away when you were younger, away from your country, from your home, is that you get this great opportunity. You're blessed with this opportunity to explore who you are. I think that's an opportunity not a lot of people in this world actually get. So if you do find yourself in that position, cherish it, appreciate it, and be grateful for it, because it's such an opportunity. It is such a great thing to have in your life where you can freely explore your personality, your character, what you care about outside of what you've known, from your family, whatever. It's such an opportunity, something to always seize. And I feel like that's one of the top things for me, top positives of moving away from your country, from your home, is you get to explore the deepest parts of your character, the deepest parts of your brain. You learn how to prioritize things for yourself. You learn how to be independent and how to be a person in this world. You kind of have to naturally make something of yourself, because I feel like obviously when you've done that big move, there's obviously some sort of expectation internally that, okay, I am doing something different from most of the people I know. I need to deliver for myself. I need to deliver for my family. I need to kind of represent something bigger. And I think it's such a blessed feeling. It's such a blessed opportunity. Not everybody gets to have it, unfortunately. So if you are in that position, be absolutely grateful for it, because it's one of the best positives of moving away from home, is how much you get to realize about yourself. And that was exactly the case for me. I learned so much about myself and my personality. I never knew that I was always anxious as a kid. I didn't know a lot of things about myself. I didn't know that I cared so much about, organization and systematic things or clean things. Like, I had no idea. I grew fonder of my home. I grew fonder of my country, of my culture, and of people of Azerbaijan, and in general, just where I come from. I feel like that appreciation only came to me, and I accepted that only after I moved to a different country. It was very difficult for me at the start because I went through phases where I was trying to figure out like who I am, what do I believe in, what are my principles, Do I want to associate myself with people back home, etc., right? Like, because I feel like if you have gone through this type of a thing, you will relate to what I'm saying. It probably sounds pretty alien to some people. They don't really understand what that is about. But a lot of the time, I think people go through this change or they move away from their country, they start realizing that, oh, some bits of back home I don't really like. These are the things in my culture I don't appreciate, etc. And I feel like to me that was a really big deal because at one point I feel like I had this weird identity crisis type of thing where I was trying to kind of be someone I wasn't and I have never been. But I feel like at this point, I'm so happy to say that I've reached a point where I've accepted and I'm proud to be Azerbaijani. So to me, it's like it's been a huge journey. So I've recently started realizing that a lot of people from, especially girls back home, they don't really like certain things and they're very negative about our country. So my advice to you would be trust me, there is layers to things and there is deeper things in life that you would need to understand and go through to accept where you come from. I've also seen a lot of people who have been in similar situations who are like Azerbaijani and they've moved away and they kind of act like they don't really belong, which is completely fine. But I feel like that is very problematic because psychologically, I feel like you will struggle to accept who you are if you cannot accept where you come from. To me, that was a really big deal. So once you accepted, at least for me, once I accepted that, I grew even fonder. I grew even bigger appreciation for my home, for my country, and I'm so proud to say that I'm Azerbaijani, and I always kind of wear it on my chest. Like I wear it with so much pride. So to me, if someone comes up to me and says, "Where are you from?" I always say I'm from Azerbaijan. I never say that I'm from elsewhere because I'm not. So I think that was like one of the greatest things I've actually come to, and it really helped me with my identity almost. Another thing, it was more about trusting people because when you are hanging out with your friends, when especially when you're in an environment like university, when you have people from all over the world, like I have till this day, I've met so many wonderful people, and they're like from all over the world. They're such awesome people. I have so much love for them. And I feel like not everyone gets that opportunity to meet so many people from different countries and from different walks of life and from different parts of this earth. So to me, learning about people from different countries, it was just such a blessing. But at the same time, for me, I always felt like, yes, it was hard slightly to make friends and like get along with people because they have a different type of humor. The view of the world is different, and it really does matter where you're from because you will see certain things in a certain way. To me, it was like, fine, even if I could find friends, I always kind of had almost trust issues that can I trust this person? I don't really know them. They don't speak my language. They don't speak Azerbaijani or Russian. So do they really understand what I'm saying? Like, am I coming across fine? Like, am I coming across funny? Because if I am making a joke, I want that person to understand my joke. Do they understand my type of humor? Do they understand the things that I find fun, interesting, sad, or happy, or whatever? So to me, it was like a lot of those questions in my head. I feel like after a while, you do find people that you can just kind of be yourself with, but I feel like it takes a lot of time and it does take a lot of sort of communication. It does take a lot of understanding each other better, understanding where you come from, where the other person comes from. So to me, I was extremely sort of anxious about, oh, am I being understood by people? Like, am I? And it's also, I feel like it's such a thing for people who learn a new language. They always struggle with the idea that no matter what they say in English, let's take English as an example, whatever they say in English, they feel like English doesn't carry the same emotion or the same meaning that, or like the same message they were trying to get across in their native language. And I think that's a big struggle, and I feel like a lot of immigrants, a lot of, international students, whoever who've kind of moved to UK, they can relate to this because it's true. I feel like certain things that I can say in Russian or Azerbaijani, they have so much sauce in them. They have so much meaning to them. They have so much like emotion to them, and you cannot like sometimes translate that directly into English. And I feel like that's a natural thing because every language carries a different type of emotion, carries a different type of depth, etc. So I feel like it's a completely normal thing to happen, but it was definitely something to get used to. Now I just wanted to jump into a couple of things that you guys submitted. Thank you so much for your active participation. It is much appreciated, and I love it when you guys reach out, submit your questions, write down a comment, whatever. It just helps me understand what my audience likes to listen to, and I just absolutely love it when I hear back from you guys. I posted something about what do people think people struggle with when they move away from their home, and we had a couple of comments. 12 said that finding a new social group is probably something a person would struggle with. I definitely agree. I think social group is such an important thing to have in your life, and especially when you grow older, I feel like you start appreciating that even more because the life that you live becomes kind of a bit monotonous and you do kind of similar things every day, more or less, week on end, go to work, come back. You need to come back to some type of fun, right? Or you come back home on a weekend, you want to go out with your friends. And if you don't have a good social group, unfortunately, life does become a bit dull. So I definitely agree. Finding a new social group is really difficult, and it is something that I struggled with. But I got there at the end. It's as long as you stick around with the good people and you kind of trust your instincts and your intuition, I think you're in a really good position. I'm always hungry _2022 said adapting. Definitely, I feel like adapting is a multi-layered thing. I feel like when you move away, you have to adapt to the culture, to the new system in place, to how things are done or said even, to things that you have to do in your life. It's a lot of adapting. It's like social norms, mannerisms, everything. It's like you need to adapt to that. You need to understand those, relate to them, and kind of assimilate to it on some degree. We did also get some questions. Both of the questions are from Lewis Coles 98. Lewis's question is, does it make your identity more blurry? Is it harder to define who you are with different cultures? Such a great question. It definitely does make your identity blurry. It did make my identity blurry, and that's what I was referring to earlier in the episode. Especially when I was 17 years old, it's the time when you're kind of still getting shaped as a human being, as an adult. So to me, it was definitely a journey. I went through phases of where I was believing certain things, then I would change my mind because I would do my research, I would learn more things, I would talk to more people. It's just like a never-ending cycle of getting to know yourself, your personality, your identity. But I feel like at the end of the day, I'm very happy in the place that I am now with my identities, that I'm just so proud about where I come from. I have so much pride in that fact that I'm Azerbaijani, and that will never change in me. And I'm also proud that I've had this amazing opportunity to live in UK, get the opportunities that I did get and I do still get. I love UK and I love what UK stands for and every single positive thing about it. So yes, it did make it very blurry at the start, but I think that is exactly what I needed to accept certain parts of me and learn more about myself at the end of the day. Lewis also asked a different question, and it says, do your childhood friends comment on behavior changes when you return home? Hashtag never complain, and with the UK flag. I love this. Never complain. I love that is such a British thing. It's funny that you say that is true. Some of my really close friends throughout the years that I kept in touch with have always commented on how much I've changed throughout the years. I feel like one of the top comments is that I am so much happier and I'm so much more myself, and it feels like I've found the place where I actually belong, which is an amazing thing to hear. So I feel like I've heard a lot of positives, and yes, they definitely see a change in my behavior. I don't think I've ever heard my friends tell me that I've completely changed, but they've definitely noticed like my levels of happiness, how much more myself I am, how much free I am, I think. I think that's the biggest thing, because back home we're very kind of strict in the way we carry ourselves, and I feel like the biggest thing was like you're a very free person, like in the way that you carry yourself, in the way you speak. You're just very free and kind of open-minded. And I feel like open-mindedness is like the biggest thing I actually have heard people tell me, like my friends tell me, is that like you used to be so close-minded, now you're so much more open-minded. And I think I have to absolutely say thanks to UK for that, because I feel like I used to be not as open-minded as I am today. And that is a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for joining Z. If you enjoyed it, share the episode with someone who you think would like it too. And follow me for more on Instagram at zpod.cast. Until next time, don't overthink too much and take it easy.